In the year before the flood, a man was taken from his house and shown things that no human eye had been given to see. According to an ancient book, attributed to a patriarch who walked before the rains, a vision unfolded that catalogued the heavens as if they were rooms in a vast unseen palace. The man was Enoch, righteous in his days and known for his labors and prayers. He was chosen not for power, but for purity of heart, a humble scribe called to witness the order above. What follows is not rumor, but a recorded disclosure, a text that echoes with authority. 10 heavens, doors that measure the march of light, treasuries where frost is kept, prisoners bound between worlds, and a throne whose brilliance dissolves all earthly speech. We will walk those levels one by one. We will listen to the voices that govern their motion, and we will be asked to answer a question at the end that will cut through routine like a blade through parchment. What does such a cosmology demand of us? How do earthly choices look in a court where time itself is counted by angels? Stay with this account to see thrones of flame, cohorts of singing seraphim, and the racks and chains that hold the disobedient. You will see doors that swing with the rhythm of days, the table of the luminaries, and a book or books given to a man to carry back to his children. Remain until the end, and a question will be placed before you, not to terrify, but to summon responsibility. The night it began, the air tasted of iron and cedar. Enoch lay with a cloak over his shoulders and a lamp guttering on the table. He heard a voice that was like many waters and like the ringing of bronze. 2 figures stood at the threshold, their faces brighter than molten silver, and their garments leaving a scent of frankincense and damp earth. One stepped forward and spoke with a tone that set Enoch's ribs steady. The dialogue that followed was not a mere exchange, but a summons with pauses like a bell struck twice. The first angel said, "Lord has chosen you, Enoch. Arise and come." Enoch blinked his eyes and felt the floor tilt beneath him. He asked, "Who am I to bear such sight?" The second angel set a palm upon his shoulder and answered, "You are chosen for your righteousness and your records." Enoch hesitated and whispered, "How shall I bear the brightness?" The first angel lifted his face and said, "These are not sights to take lightly, but to remember and to write." In the silence that followed, Enoch felt a cool wind like pages turning and the scent of rain on dry earth. The angels took his hand, and the house dissolved into a field of stars. They rose, and the first heavens unfurled as a ceiling of cloud and centuries. The contrast was, below the world smelled of smoke and livestock. Above there was a metallic hum, as if the sky itself were a harp. Enoch saw the first heaven like a great courtyard lined with gates of bronze, each gate watched by a watcher named Uriel, and others whose names the angels spoke softly. Uriel standing with a lamp, Raguel pacing like a judge, and Sariel, whose eyes were like polished stone. The dialogue in that place was cautious and full of courtesy. One watcher said, "This gate keeps the hour of autumn," and the other replied, "The Lord set measures for each season." Enoch stepped between them and felt a pressure at his chest as though a hand pressed a seal into his heart. Every phrase was heavy with scent, myrrh of sacrificial smoke, the sharpness of cold metal, the distant sweetness of ripe fruit, wind sifting through chaff. He heard the creak of leather harnesses from winged ones, the soft rustle of feathered garments, and the distant murmur of chains in a pit. Treasure chests gleamed in alcoves, pearls frost-bound in glass jars, vessels of light heaped like grains, both alluring and guarded. They spoke of prisons beneath the floors where giants and rebels were accounted for. The first and second heavens taught him that above the ordinary sky there are orders and stores and rules. 18 years before this vision, Enoch had been a man known by neighbors and strangers alike as one who walked without pride. He kept account of births and seasons and transcribed songs for children. His wife Miriam taught him the patterns of the stars as they marked planting and harvest. Their sons Methuselah and Lamech learned to listen to his counsel and to store grain against famine. He had been a scribe not by training but by compulsion, by a sense that words are vessels that outlive hands. In marketplaces he would barter advice for a cup of olive oil and would sit by scholars reading fragments of scrolls that spoke of the patriarchs. Rumors of visions moved like birds, and once a traveling teacher named Hanan had begged Enoch to speak of the dreams that had kept him awake. He had resisted fame, preferring the slow justice of labor, yet in secret nights he had written marginal notes to God, asking for mercy for the poor and for understanding of the celestial order. When the angels called him, it was not because he sought the throne, but because his life had been one long apprenticeship in reverence. This backstory of work and prayer gives weight to his witness and helps explain why the Eternal chose this particular man to be an archivist of the heavens. They carried Enoch higher, and the light changed again. In the third and fourth heavens, the air lost all trace of smoke and took on the sweetness of orchards in bloom. The third was a paradise of trees bearing fruit with colors that had no names. In his tongue, and a river whose music was like 1,000 women's laughter. He smelled crushed leaves and warm stone underfoot, and tasted the memory of honey, though he had not eaten. An angel named Phanuel led him, while birds of crystal flew at the edges, and a figure called Remiel touched leaves, and they sang under his finger. The dialogue here was softer, more explanatory. Phanuel said, "This is the garden where life reposes," and Remiel added, "Each fruit is measured for each soul." Enoch reached out to a tree and felt the bark under his palm as cool as new copper. He heard the drip of nectar, the rustle of garments of the attending cherubim, and saw light fractured like gems. The table of the luminaries was set nearby, with arrangements of gems corresponding to sun and moon, and small lamps that wound up and down like clocks. A servant angel named Zophiel lifted a cup of dew and offered it, and when Enoch drank the cup filled him with memory of times he had not lived. A secondary character, a clerk named Josiah, wrote the names of those who would inherit, and another named Azariah guarded a wooden chest of seeds. Here he learned of the tree of life, and of fruits that heal, and of fruits set aside for those who will inherit the world. At the midpoint of our account, pause with me and consider what surprised you most. If this vision unsettled you, you are not alone. If you felt awe or dread, type below a single word that best names that feeling. Is it wonder, fear, hope, or confusion? Share one word, and if you wish, add a sentence explaining why that word fits your heart. Your response helps shape future episodes where we dive deeper into testimonies and manuscripts. Many viewers find that naming their reaction opens a path to community dialogue and lets us pursue the questions you value most. While you decide, remember that this is not a spectacle, but a summons, and that your single word may guide the next layer of inquiry we present. For now, we return to Enoch, who was led further into levels where beauty and terror meet. Above the paradisal gardens, the air grew bitter and the colors hard. In the fifth and sixth heavens, Enoch encountered prisons and records. The angels Gabriel and Michael appeared in full array, their faces like hammered gold, and their voices carried command. They showed him cells carved from light, where watchers called Grigori sat bound for teaching forbidden arts. He smelled damp chains and the sour breath of regret, and heard the scraping of metal and the frequent cry of one named Azazel, who repented with a voice that broke like thin glass. The moment of tension here expanded across Enoch's chest as memory stacked upon choice. He confronted the spectacle of the rebel watchers and recalled the faces of his neighbors who had chosen comfort over righteousness. A guard named Barachiel pointed to ledgers bound with red thread and said, "Each transgression is counted. The penalty stays until the appointed time." Enoch felt a tremor of mercy and judgment at once. He saw names written in ink that refused to dry, and heard a litany recited like a verdict. This scene held him with a moral weight, the kind that quickens the breath. He had to decide whether to intercede with the angels or remain recorder. His hands shook, and he remembered Miriam's gentle face and the words he had taught his sons to keep care for the weak and honor the covenant. The decision pressed him inward like a narrowing door. He chose obedience to the order given, which was to witness and to write, not to judge. The prison sights were described in sensory detail: the metallic tang, the chill on skin, the dull thud of chains, the whisper of names like insects, and the sight of eyes turned inward. The narrative then pauses to explain the mechanisms of the heavens with a tone of sober instruction. The table of the sun and moon was measured in cubits and revolutions, each portal counted by hours, and the angels recited numeric lists as if reading a ledger. There were 12 portals for the sun and the moon, with specific names for each gate, and a long enumeration of the paths by which light moves. The angel showed Enoch a device like a wheel that marked seasons like teeth on a gear, and they spoke of set times under the orders of the Lord. The list of guardians included Gabriel, Michael, Uriel, Ragiel, Remiel, Phanuel, Zophiel, Barachiel, and others, whose faces were described in terms of material and sound: wings like hammered bronze, voices like rushing waters, eyes like pools of quicksilver. Enoch was taught the rules by which the luminaries course and the measures by which years are counted. He wrote down names of portals, the colors of their stones, and the hours when each opens and closes, a litany that sounded both exact and sacred. Higher still, the 7th to the 10th heavens opened with magnitudes that strained language. When Enoch reached the 7th heaven, he saw a host of seraphim circling a throne that was not merely a chair but a mountain of radiance. The sensory register here swelled, heat like an oven and chill like a frozen star at once, scents of incense so thick it seemed to coat the air, the taste of light like iron and sweet resin, the sound of an unnumbered choir chanting "Holy, Holy, Holy" in harmonics that rearranged memory. The throne sat upon an expanse of glassy water, and around it were wheels within wheels, their rims covered with eyes. A personal exchange occurred with the presence often called the Lord. The dialogue was limited, yet full, each line falling like thunder and like balm. The Lord said, "Enoch, who has written?" Enoch answered, "How shall they believe a vision so vast?" The Lord said, "Truth is not measured by belief alone, but by deeds that follow knowledge." Enoch replied, "If I speak, will men listen, or will they call me mad?" The Lord fixed his gaze and said, "The choice to hear is given to every soul in their own season." Enoch's knees trembled. He felt his hair stand as if charged with light. And the angels anointed him with oil that tasted of salt and honey. A being named Metatron placed a finger upon Enoch's tongue, and the taste of words became a burden and a gift. In the moments of the climax, Enoch was stripped of his old fears and clothed in responsibility. He was given books bound in skins that shimmered like starlight, and told to write of the luminaries, the prisons, the treasures, and the judgments. He received explicit instruction on themes for each volume: a ledger of fate, a book of names, a record of secret things, a manual of the signs to come, and a final admonition to preserve mercy. An angel called Pravivil stood at his side and said, "Write each word and seal it with truth." The angels enumerated the contents in clear tones. The books were to include accounts of those who fell, instructions on calendars, measures of the sun and moon, prophecies about the flood, and counsels to the just. Enoch felt his body change. His face became lined with the light he had seen, his voice deeper, as if the air had been tempered. He would return altered, carrying a burden, a gift, and a task. There was a second moment of tension when Enoch contemplated the fate of those bound and thought of his own children. He remembered Methuselah's hands full of soil and Lamech's laughter, and felt a cold like a grave's breath. He could stay and plead, or depart and fulfill the command. The memory of Miriam's teaching rose like a hymn, instructing him to do what is given. He chose the path of obedience, though his heart throbbed with the ache of an absent father.
This decision layered grief with resolve and created a knot of feeling that would not untie easily. The narrative records his inward wrestling in sensory terms, the taste of iron in his mouth, the chill on his palms, the sound of a distant bell, and the sight of a door closing slowly like a shutter. Descending was not the same as returning. Enoch came back bearing light in his eyes and books in his hands. He walked among his people, delivering instruction and warning, and many mocked, and some listened. A few recorded faithfully, others hid the words in corners. The transformation was visible. He walked more slowly, his voice carried the cadence of the heavens, and his face held the shine of what he had touched.
He spoke of measures of the sun, of doors of frost, of the throne, and of the names of the watchers. He exhorted children to mercy, warned rulers against arrogance, and urged neighbors to keep covenant. Some responded with repentance, and others with denial. The books he set in safekeeping with friends named Joshua, Simeon, Hanan, and Elda, who promised to guard the writings and to read them to those who sought wisdom. The epilogue unfolds across time and must be heard as 3 moments that trace the effect of the vision in the months that followed. 1 month later, the town stood under a new quiet. Those who had heard Enoch's first words gathered at the square. Miriam and Methuselah and a small circle of listeners met and prayed. The air smelled of fresh bread and incense, and the memory of the vision hovered like a harp string ready to play. Enoch walked among them, reading fragments and urging acts of charity. A seed of contrition took root in some, and in others skepticism hardened. At 3 months, a dispute arose among elders, jealousies over the custody of the books surfaced, and scholars like Hanan and Joshua debated authenticity in the market, while women like Elda and Sarah defended the necessity of mercy. The town tasted division, and yet out of it came a small school where children learned the names of the luminaries and the importance of honest living. At 6 months, travelers from distant hamlets had heard the rumor. A scribe from the coastal city came to see the books and asked to copy them. A humble priest named Baruch knelt and wept at the reading, and a shepherd who had once mocked now gave his best lamb to the poor. The long-term effect was uneven but real. Some lives bent toward the virtues the vision demanded, while others remained unchanged. The final lines of the epilogue remind the listener that revelation invites response, and that time will show who chose obedience and who chose forgetfulness. Now reflect on what you have heard. The vision offers images that shock and images that console. The throne that shines, the prisoners that mourn, the treasures that glisten, and the measures that govern the sky. These things are not mere curiosities. They are instruments of moral gravity. If such a court exists, if watches and records and measured days govern fate, then the simplest choices assume weight. How will you live with a ledger that sees and a judge that will ask for deeds, not excuses? Share one word below that names your response to the vision and explain why in a sentence. Your participation matters. It shapes the next episode and helps us choose which manuscripts and experts to consult. We close with a recapitulation and an urgent call to life. The throne blazed, the prisoners wept, and Enoch returned with books, like a shepherd returning with lost sheep. The moral application is simple and demanding. If justice is ordered and recorded, if mercy is catalogued and taught, then our acts must align with what we profess. Will we live in a way that honors the measure of the luminaries and the weight of a neighbor's need? Will we choose care over indifference? This is not abstraction, but a summons to daily deeds. Consider today one small action to align your life with the vision, perhaps an act of generosity, a confession, a reconciliation. The question that remains, and that you must answer, not for the video, but for your conscience, is this. When faced with the court of the eternal, what will your deeds say about you? If this account moved you, share that single word below and join the conversation. If you wish to follow our investigations into ancient manuscripts and testimonies, subscribe and be part of a community that treats these narratives with respect and seeks honest understanding. May the Lord keep and guide your steps and grant you the courage to live as one who has seen a measure of the heavens. Shalom.